Welcome back. So I want to do something a little different today. I did a video not too long ago on my favorite broadcasts to watch, right? In having this channel and watching the broadcasts from every team. I do have certain broadcasts that I look forward to. There are certain broadcasts that can be kind of grating. So without getting into who the best, who the worst are, and all that wonderful stuff, I just want to talk about what I think makes for a good production team, what makes for a good announce team, and what makes for a really good experience as a hockey fan watching the game. And I think it starts with you have to have a good play-by-play announcer, and it can be just as simple as you need to know everybody's names and you need to know them correctly. Bob Cole said he would go down before the games and he would ask players if he didn't know how to pronounce their names. He would ask them how to pronounce their names. So Bob Cole, if he got it wrong, if he thought he got it wrong, he may very well have been pronouncing it the way that the player told him to pronounce it, because sometimes the way that it's generally pronounced is not necessarily the way the player wants it to be pronounced. This is especially true of European players, and I get it. I think there are probably European players that come over and they just resign themselves to, well, my name's not going to get pronounced correctly. Oh well. Which, again, play by play, and it's something minor, but it can really pick at you, right? If you hear a name, and especially if it's a name that's not, I won't say common, but if it's a well known player. So maybe it's an uncommon last name, but it's a well known player. And as soon as that play by play announcer says it wrong, like imagine, Mario Lemieux coming through the center of the ice and you hear, hey, that's that Lemieux guy. Yeah, that Lemieux, he's great, man. You would rightfully destroy your television. That is the only logical thing to do in that situation, is to destroy the TV. But yeah, this is standard, right? And then with play by play too, you should just call the game. And I say this because there are times where play by play announcers kind of meander, and they might go off into the distance, and they might be talking about something else. And meanwhile, you're watching the TV and going, yeah, there's something going on. In fact, there's some pressure. They just got a really good shot. Why aren't you talking about it? Why aren't you doing that? Because maybe they get into it with the color guy. Now there are times where it works. Then, and again, really good combinations can do this very, very well. And this, I think, is the bedrock of making a good broadcast. You have to have the right color announcer. I think ideally the color announcer is usually somebody who's played hockey. Notice I'm not saying NHL. I don't think you need to have played in the NHL to be a good color announcer. It's sort of like a coach, right? A coach doesn't have to have played in the National Hockey League to understand how an NHL game works, understand NHL strategies. A color announcer could have had a good career playing hockey and never have played in the NHL. Maybe he played in the KHL. Maybe he played in the AHL, the ECHL. It's not important. What's important is, does he understand the game? Does he understand the parts of the game that for laymen, for fans like myself, we may not be as aware of. So I find they're good. And then if you get into the Mickey Redmond part, it's being able to tell a good story. It's that when your color announcer starts saying, that takes me back, I remember back in 1976, that you're not grabbing the remote going, this is going to go on for a while, I'm going to go ahead and mute it until he's done talking. So that's important, right? Where when he starts his story, you're saying, I got to hear the rest of this. And there are some great stories. There are times where I'm doing a review and that a story that's told, usually by Mickey Redmond, makes it into the review. But there have been some good ones by Jamie McLennan, Kelly Rudy, and usually with goaltenders. My favorite thing with goaltenders as color announcers is the way they tear themselves down. The way that they're like, yep, nope, I was terrible, and they will bring up something. They might bring up something that happened while they were playing, with like, yeah, the guys did this because I had a really bad game, and oh, I remember that night. Or they'll talk about somebody reaching a milestone. They'll be like, well, yeah, but I mean, he scored 7 goals on me, so where's my award? So having a color announcer who knows how to play off that play-by-play announcer, and a play-by-play announcer that knows when to let the color guy go and tell his story is really, really important. Because if they're talking over each other, if there's a lot of weird, awkward silences, if they just don't click, that's a problem. And so you have to watch for that. So this to me is the most important thing. So I'll go ahead and asterisk that, because if you have a play-by-play color announcer, if one or the other is bad, you're probably not going to enjoy it as much. If both of them, it's just off, it's a bad watch. It is a bad watch. The between the benches. So the reason you're getting this video today is because Leah Hextall got a lot of people talking last night with her conduct between the benches between Toronto and Tampa. The person who's between the benches is not always your color announcer. Sometimes these are equal. So sometimes your color announcer is between the benches. But what we're seeing a lot right now too is that you have three. You have these guys are in the booth, and then you have somebody between the benches saying, man, you're not going to, kind of the gossip person, right? You're going to believe what's going on down here. So, yeah, the between the benches is important. You need to know, though, when to kind of experience it. I'm gonna harken back to as a wrestling fan, and I say this because wrestling and hockey should both be an event, and they should both feel kind of a little bit over the top, a little bit of a circus, and it's about having that balance. And on wrestling, we used to have you'd have your American and you'd have your Canadian, and then in Canadian, which was Maple Leaf Wrestling. I'm going somewhere with this, trust me. You would have times where they would actually take the commentary out. So if you're watching a wrestling show, it's endless commentary, just endless. On Maple Leaf Wrestling, which was up here in Canada, they would have like a 4 or 5 minute portion of the match where they'd actually stripped out the commentary. Now, either they'd stripped it out or it wasn't added post-production before coming up to Canada. But it was so much more interesting. It was so much, and I remember thinking as a kid, wrestling's a lot more interesting in parts when the announcers aren't talking. When you have somebody between the benches who knows, okay, now I need to come out and talk about what I'm hearing, or you have an announcer that'll stand back. And my favorite visual this year, Ray Ferraro's very good at this, but Jen Botterill, in between benches, there's a lot of arguing going on between the benches, and she just stands there, arms crossed, and it reminded me of a teacher. It reminded me of a parent when you're trying to get the attention of the class and you're just waiting for people to settle down, or as a parent, you're like, all right, well, I'll just stand here until you guys are done yapping. How long is this gonna take? And I think there's a balance there. And I think it's important that the person between the benches is not the one being talked about. It's almost like a referee, right? You know a game has been officiated well if nobody talks about the officiating. So if people are complaining about the officiating, but if people aren't talking about it, then it was probably a pretty well officiated game. So the person between the benches, if this person is over the top, and again, I'm not saying anything negative about anybody here. I'm just saying if that person between the benches, because again, we have different opinions on different announcers. If that person between the benches is making it hard to pay attention to this, then it can knock off a really good combination of play-by-play and color announcers. And then you get your studio team. So in between periods, and this is the weird thing, I think my favorite team in between periods might be NESN. Now, NESN takes a lot of criticism for Jack Edwards, right? And I get it. Jack Edwards, absolutely biased. Yes. Homer, absolutely. A Boston Bruin could behead a player from the other team, and he'd be like, well, yeah, but I mean, come on. Beheading isn't technically a penalty. Show me where it is in the rule book. We're just getting creative. So, or he'd argue that the guy's head was probably off before he went on the ice. So, the studio team, though, for NESN is fantastic. They do a good job of explaining the plays. They don't talk down to people. And the other thing with your studio team is you have to remember that as a broadcaster, and when you're dealing with the NHL, and on the American side, you do have to try to, attract new viewers. So if you're trying to attract new viewers, it's important. And this comes back to play-by-play color in between the benches, too, that you're also kind of explaining without talking down to people. And this... there's that sweet spot where you are explaining something that happened in a game, but you're not doing it in such a way so that the person watching isn't going, yeah, we know. Yeah, we got it. No, I got it. And there have been times where they over-explain, where about that third or fourth time they explain, I'm kind of sighing and going, oh, they already went over this. Why are we doing this again? Which, again, you're not going to hear it in reviews. One thing I've learned over the last, and we're going on 6 years now, is when I do reviews of games and everything, I mean, I can give opinions on things, but if I complain about everything that might sort of make me roll my eyes watching games, considering how many I watch. It can just come off as, yeah, there's a lot of complaining. I'd kind of rather hear what happened in the game. So again, I try to make sure it stays to what happened in the game, unless Mickey Redmond tells a really good story, and then I kind of have to mention that in the review. But again, your studio team should be able to keep the attention of the audience, keep them from necessarily flipping channels, which people I think usually do during intermissions anyways, right? Most people would. But basically keep interest or find the latest YouTube video. Hi, I'm here. So yeah, the studio team's important, and then they've got to set up the next period of hockey as well, and do a good job too of explaining what happened, go through things. And this is where it's important too that they don't sound like they're complaining too much. This is important where they're not just, every intermission isn't about, well, why did we get a penalty and they didn't? If that's what every intermission looks like, that's going to be problematic. And then really, and I have this at the bottom because I think this is the underlying theme of a lot of it, is production. There's one thing that drives me nuts, and I haven't talked about it. I'm going to talk about it here because I'm going to see if I'm the only one that's driven me nuts. And maybe it's just my TV. But I know it happens on TNT broadcasts. I think it happens with the ESPN Plus ones too. So they show the studio headshot of each hockey player, and it looks really pixelated. And it kind of drives me a little bit crazy. It's one of those things that I see, and I look at that and I go, okay, so that seems like a miss, right? And it's one of those things that can kind of take you out of the moment where you're like, why is everything high def? Everything on the screen's high def. The picture's crystal clear with the players, and this guy's face is pixelated, you know? Oh, here's your starting lineup. Okay, I think that's Jamie Benn's face. Not sure, it's all pixelated. It's weird. And it's one of those things that I look at, and it can kind of take me out of the moment, right? And then if they have an over-the-top production that makes it seem cartoony, that can be kind of tough to watch. Remembering Fox back in the early 90s, right? And so production's really important too. One thing that can drive, and this will drive color announcers and play-by-play guys nuts, is if you have somebody in the production truck that's not getting everything queued up at the right time. There's nothing quite like, so I want to take a look at the play that just took place here right in front of the net. If we can, okay, I'm being told we don't have that queued up currently. So what I saw was, and so now we're just kind of hearing a retelling rather than actually having the visual. So it's important to have a good production team, and that means having good guys in the truck, having, you know, everything set up so that it works really smoothly. And again, it's a good production if we're not complaining about it after. If we're not talking about how awkward graphics are, I mean, theme music seems like something small, but every time I hear TSN playing the Hockey Night in Canada theme, I don't know, it just seems wrong to me. It seems wrong to me that CBC let that go. I still find that odd, and it to me makes TSN Hockey Night in Canada. Well, Hockey Night in Canada has a decent theme song. It's not the Hockey Night in Canada theme to me because I'm old, and that's yeah, you get started, and that's the Hockey Night in Canada song. Might be part of the reason why we enjoy TSN as much as we do, but it is one of those things that I think, and again, I talked about this when I was talking about the broadcast teams and which ones I enjoy. I think there's some that do it really, really well. And I think there are some that, you know, again, there might be an issue. Maybe it's the person between the benches. Maybe it's the color announcers, not great. One upvote that I want to give, though, JT Brown at the start of the season, you could tell when you watched the Seattle broadcast, he was new and he was learning it. He has gotten a lot better. He's a lot more fluid, and there were times early in the season too where sometimes we'd be talking about something and I'd be like, I don't think that went where he wanted it to go because he might meander, and I don't see that now. They have a pretty good team out of Seattle. So that's kind of fun to watch, and sometimes with the productions, and again, this is the first year for ESPN TNT, so I do expect things to change from year one to year two. And again, we'll see what they do in between this season and next, because we're winding down this season. So then once we get into the playoffs, there's going to be limited places that I'm going to be able to watch these games. A lot of it's going to be through Sportsnet and whatever feed they're using. But yeah, it is interesting to see what people prefer. So let me know in the comment section below what you like in a broadcast and what you don't. Which parts of the broadcast you tune in for and you enjoy, and which parts make you reach for the remote to mute the TV for a little bit because there's something going on, or maybe you have a choice between two different feeds, like I often do, where I'll say, okay, there's a game between, say, Nashville and Ottawa. Okay, I can watch TSN, or I can watch Bally's, the Nashville feed, and then it might be dependent on who's there. Is Terry Crisp, in the studio? I might want to listen to what Crispy has to say, and that kind of thing. So let me know what you guys think, or and again, this is another example. Maybe I'll watch TSN for the broadcasting part, and then in between periods, go over to the Nashville part. I'm just using that as an example. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. What makes a good broadcast for you? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.